Hello, everyone. I'm Wei Zhang from McMaster University, here with my colleagues Janice Etlington and Jack Young. Our session is Show Me the Savings, Bridging Collections and Bibliometrics to Evaluate Transformative Agreements. To get us started, I'll give a quick snapshot of McMaster and a bit of context around our open access landscape. Then I'll move into the problem we are trying to solve, why evaluating TA sounds straightforward, but is actually quite tricky in practice. Next, Jack will walk through McMaster's approach, how we used OpenAlex to assist data collection and analysis. And finally, Janice will wrap things up with a look at the broader landscape. To anchor the scale, McMaster University was established in 1887 in Hamilton, Ontario. We are consistently ranked among Canada's most research-intensive universities, serving about 35,500 FTEs. The library steward a 16.5 million Canadian dollars collections budget, so understanding value, especially for big-ticket agreements, is critical. This context matters because the volume and diversity of publishing across our disciplines makes manual tracking impractical. If we can automate and document the analysis, we can not only answer are we saving, but also showcase the value of TAs to campus stakeholders and consortia. At McMaster, we now have 21 various OA agreements, 12 via CRKN, our national consortium, 5 via OCO, our provincial consortium, and several local agreements. Our earliest signed in 2021. These agreements help authors publish OA with waived or discounted APCs while maintaining read access. We support authors through our library open access page and tools like SciFree, which help researchers quickly check journal eligibility and discount terms. These services are popular, but popularity isn't the same as documented value. So, why do we need to evaluate these agreements? Libraries have invested heavily in read and publish or transformative agreements, or TAs, and note that we are going to use these terms interchangeably throughout our presentation. These agreements promise to expand open access, but it's not always clear what value we are getting back. We want to know three things. How much are we saving? How many articles are being published under these discounts? And do those discounts justify the overall spend? The challenge is that the data are fragmented and inconsistent. Publisher reports, bibliometric databases, and internal spreadsheets rarely align. Without a reliable, repeatable method, it's hard to show real impact or make confident renewal decisions. That's what motivated us to develop a more automated, evidence-based approach to quantify the true value of these agreements. Here's where the pain point really starts to show. On the data side, publisher-supplied information can be incomplete or inconsistent. There's no standard way to link together institutional author data, APC list prices, and the discount terms from each agreement. And when we look to bibliometric sources for help, we find missing or inaccurate metadata, things like corresponding author details or OA status. All of this data lives in different places, publisher reports, databases, and a few too many spreadsheets. On the workflow side, the process is just as messy. Manual tracking is slow, error-prone, and doesn't scale. It's hard to keep multiple systems in sync and up to date. And without some level of automation, it's nearly impossible to monitor financial and scholarly impact over time or to compare across publishers. So the takeaway here is simple. We need a scalable, automated, and evidence-based workflow to really understand the long-term value of these agreements. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Jack.
Okay, so to start exploring solutions to this problem, we turn to a tool called OpenAlex. For those unfamiliar, OpenAlex is an open bibliographic database of over 270 million scholarly outputs. And it had a couple of key characteristics that made it really well suited to this particular project. So first and foremost, it's free to use. Both the UI, the user interface, and the API are completely open and free. Because we knew that many other libraries were facing the same challenges that we were here at McMaster, we wanted to make sure that any solution that we came up with would be applicable broadly and openly as well. Um, Similarly, open access is very well integrated with other open data sources like the Directory of Open Access Journals, DOAJ, Crossref, the DOI minting agency, and Research Organization Registry, the affiliation PID. Um, and it also, for each individual publication record, it contained two important metadata fields that were relatively unique within bibliographic databases. These were corresponding institution and APC list price. I want to speak briefly about these two specifically and why they're important to this project. So in order to receive a discount under our read and publish agreements, the corresponding author on a given publication had to be from McMaster. So the corresponding institution field made it really easy to quickly isolate articles where a McMaster author was in that corresponding author position. The APC list price um, field is filled out by, first of all, looking at the Directory of Open Access Journals, which tracks the APC list price for each journal listed there, and apply it to the Open Alex record at the publication level, so that each publication within Open Alex will have an APC list price field. When that information is not available through the Directory of Open Access Journals, OpenAlex will also go out and crawl the publisher websites to look for that data to get into that field. So what we were able to do was create a search strategy using those fields to isolate just the works that would be APCable, that'd be subject to an APC, and that were from the year that we were hoping to analyze. So at the end of the day, we used four filters within OpenAlex. The publication year is 2024. The corresponding institution was McMaster University. The publication type, we isolated just articles and reviews. The reason for this is that typically things like editorials and commentaries and letters aren't subject to APCs. So we wanted to make sure we're just focusing on publication types that would typically pay APCs for. And then finally, we filtered just to open access status of either gold or hybrid, because we know not all OA types require APCs. So diamond open access, for instance, doesn't charge an APC. Green open access is self-archiving open access, so there's no APCs involved. Gold means the journal, all the work in the journal is supported by APCs. Everything is made open. Hybrid is that there's a mix of subscription-based content and APC paid for open access content using APCs. So the idea here was with these four filters, we could build a publication set. We could then look at the list price for each individual publication, sum that up to get a total amount that would have been paid had we not had read and publish agreements. The idea was then to take that total amount that would have been paid, apply the discounts that we get from the specific publishers with which we have agreements to get a total amount saved or total cost avoided by being part of these read publish agreements. So to tackle that second part, applying those discounts that we have that were part of our agreements, we turned to computational notebook. So essentially, we built a computational notebook code that queried the OpenAlex API to pull that publication set that I identified earlier and apply the discounts from our specific read and publish agreements. So for those unfamiliar with computational notebooks, they're interactive document-based environments where you can write and execute code. What makes them unique is that you can document the steps and rationale along the way by inserting text within and in between steps in the code, which makes it really easy for folks that might not be as familiar, like myself, with the coding environment to follow along. And I think it's a real boon for when we're trying to share this type of information, share code books and things like that, to have that clear documentation along the way. We were able to build a notebook that could visualize, do some standard or basic visualizations of the results we were finding. And there are a number of different places that you can create these computational notebooks: Jupyter Notebook, Google Colab, just two examples. So you can find the full code that we created on our GitHub. We encourage you to check it out. To, if you're interested, clone the repository and try it with your own institution. All that you'd need to do is swap out the McMaster organization filter with your own, and then add your own specific discount list, which we've provided a template for within the code itself or within the repository itself. And so the idea here was that what we've created can be easily replicated and used by anybody else who might be interested in exploring this approach. Okay, so what we did first was we ran this code as if we had received no publisher information at all. That is, as if we were only relying on OpenAlex for giving us the data here. And doing that, we were able to generate an initial result, right? So we saw that the estimated cost of APCs for McMaster in 2024 before discount was almost 3 million. We saw that there was, after we applied all the discounts for each individual publisher and journal that we had, we saw that the total cost paid at the end of the day, the actual cost paid, was closer to 1 million, which obviously translates to a theoretical savings of about $1.85 million. We say theoretical here because it's not definite that had our authors had to pay full price, that they would have chosen to publish in the same journal, right? Theoretically, these theoretical savings are like the highest amount of savings had everything else gone the same, had the authors still published, even though they would have had to pay APCs in 2024. This is the saving that we would have seen. And we're also, as I say, built right into the code, able to generate some basic visualizations. This one, for instance, looks at by publisher the amount of saved and the number of publications that received a discount. So this can obviously help us evaluate more granularly the impact of individual agreements with publishers. Okay, so again, this was an approach that assumed we had no information from the publishers, that we were just using OpenAlex data. And so what we wanted to do was look under the hood and make sure that the data we're collecting is what we expected. And we wanted to get a sense of how confident we could be in this approach. And what we found was a number of data limitations. So we had that publication list from the publishers, right? And what the first thing we did was compare the list that the publishers had supplied us to the list that OpenAlex had returned. And what we found was that OpenAlex publication list had missed about 300 publications that were supplied on those publisher lists. And these were missed for a variety of reasons, but I'm calling out three that seem to be the most prominent. The first and definitely the most prominent was the missing and inaccurate corresponding author data. That is, there was nothing in the corresponding author data field within OpenAlex, which meant that first filter, that corresponding institution filter, cut all those results out immediately and meant that we couldn't capture them with our OpenAlex approach. Second, we saw instances of missing or inaccurate OA status data. That is, at the publisher's website, it appeared that the article was a gold or a hybrid article. When we got into the OpenAlex metadata, though, it was listed as something else, closed, green, something different. Again, that OA status filter cut out. And the third one is a problem that's a little bit less straightforward, I think, to solve. And that's that the year of acceptance and APC payment don't always align with the year of publication. So what I mean by that is you might submit to a journal in December of a year and pay all the fees and get all the discounts in December, but the publication date, the final publication, doesn't come out till 2024. So there's this misalignment between when the discount was applied and when the publication date was, which makes it hard to run analysis based purely on publication date. The one data issue that I want to return to, because it was by far the most prominent issue, was the corresponding author data. And it's the one that presents the most problems for us right now. So we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this data and see exactly what was missing and how frequently we were missing this type of content. So what we did was we took a look for all gold and hybrid OA articles published by McMaster in 2024. That means McMaster didn't have to be in the corresponding institution field. We just wanted to find anything that had a McMaster author on it that was published either gold or hybrid in OpenAlex. So there was about 3,000 results that came back on that. And when we looked at the corresponding author field for those results, 42% had no corresponding author information at all. This was somewhat surprising to us, right? Because it obviously affects our bottom line here. That means that 42% of the content just simply wasn't accessible to us when we put that corresponding institution filter on. We wanted to understand if this was an issue with the data coming from the publishers or with the way that OpenAlex was collating the data. So what we did is we took those 3,000 articles and we ran the exact same data set through a subscribe tool we have at McMaster called Dimensions Analytics, and found that within that tool, only 12% of the records lacked corresponding author data. So what this suggests is it's possible to better capture this corresponding author data. For some reason, there's an issue with the way OpenAlex is doing it that is leading to these errors. And OpenAlex acknowledges this. So in their technical documentation, they say it's this that the corresponding is a new feature. The information may be missing from many works, and they're working on it, and that hopefully coverage will improve soon. And I'm very hopeful that that is the case because I think that going into this, we didn't anticipate being able to get down to the exact dollar how much we might be saving under these deals. But we wanted to make sure we were getting to a relatively reasonable estimate or something that we could feel pretty confident in. And while I'd say it's hard to feel confident in 42% of the records missing data, we might feel a little bit more confident if we get closer to that 10% missing data rate. So this is definitely something to stay tuned to. Another data issue that's important to call out is the APC list price data, because for the records that we returned, 17% had no APC list price data at all, which means that OpenAlex wasn't able to find a current list price for that journal that particular article was published in. Now, this is a little bit easier for us to work around in that we could use the median value of known APCs in order to estimate the cost of that particular APC. So what we did was we looked at all the APCs from the same publisher, and we used the median price of those APCs in order to fill in the blanks, essentially. So there's a workaround, but it still means that every time we do an estimation, we're getting further and further away from the exact values here. There's also the case that APC list prices found on publisher websites may not represent the actual amount paid. So we know there's things like promotional rates. We know some journals may give discounts to certain regions of the world. So in other words, there's not one APC price in every case. And so the fact that there's only one field for APC list price within OpenAlex means that we might not always be getting an entirely accurate picture of how much would have been paid in the absence of these read-publish agreements. Another thing around APC data is that it's only available for the most recent year, right? So we're unable to apply this approach retroactively. And because studies have shown that APC costs are raising faster than the rate of inflation, it's not so easy to just apply an inflation calculation on top of APCs to go backward or forward in time. Now, in our instance, we were just interested in the recent data, the 2024 data, so it didn't affect us too much, but it's something to keep in mind should you ever want to look retroactively at something like this. And then finally, something that's dawned on us as we've worked with this data more and more is the potential that as more organizations sign on to read and publish agreements, list price could be a less valuable savings metric. That is, when nobody's paying the list price anymore, if everybody's in the read and publish agreement, then can we really say we're saving that money anymore? The list price becomes a less valuable metric. In fact, it would behoove the publishers to increase list prices, to inflate list prices, so that the read and publish agreements look like they're saving institutions more money. So all this is to say is that while taken at face value, it seems to make sense to use APC list price, at least in the current state of things, to estimate value of deals like this, that there could come a time if these things become more widespread and widely adopted, that list price isn't the best metric for establishing value anymore. Okay, so Having explained sort of our open Alex approach, which we created in the absence of publisher data, and which we found a number of data issues with, we wanted to try another approach where we folded in that publication data, the data supplied directly from the publishers, and folded that in and combined it with our open Alex estimate approach. So what we did is we developed a standardized template where we could collate the publisher supplied data. So as was mentioned earlier, right, we get the data from the publishers, but the format of it is very inconsistent, both across publishers and sometimes even within publishers. So some will give us spreadsheets monthly, some maybe quarterly, some are annually. The fields themselves that each publisher captures are totally different. And so what we wanted to do was get a common starting point. And so we identified 15 key metadata fields that we thought would give us here at McMaster enough data to be able to meaningfully evaluate the impact of these deals. So some of these metadata fields are highlighted here. Some of them are really just basic article metadata like DOI, article title, McMaster author, journal, etc. But we also have made attempts to link each article to things like the McMaster department that benefited from this discount, right? To get a bit more granular in how we're assessing the impact of of these deals for individual departments. Um, we also looked at both the journal and article level research area so that we could get a sense of which subject areas are benefiting most from these deals. So um, and then we obviously included all of the APC list prices, these three categories: the list price, the price we would have paid; the discount, the amount that was taken off of that list price as a part of our deal; and then the APC paid the actual amount that the McMaster author paid at the end of the day. So we did all that for the existing publisher data that we had. And then what we did was we used Open Alex to fill the gaps that existed. So whenever there was data missing, we used Open Alex to fill in the spaces. And what we found, right, was we got to a new estimation that we believe we could be much more confident in presenting. So here we see the Open Alex approach, the original Open Alex approach, compared to this hybrid approach. And what we see is the theoretical savings, right, jump from 1.8 million based on just the Open Alex data to 2.5 million under the hybrid approach. And I think the majority of this is due to the missed content from the Open Alex search because it was missing corresponding author information. So a lot of that stuff that was missing from our Open Alex search was integrated into the hybrid approach because the publishers had supplied it to us directly. And so once we get these data points, and again, we have those 15 metadata fields that we're now capturing, we can start to generate visualizations that might be integrated into a dashboard or just a standard way of evaluating year to year where the benefit of these deals lies. So here, this first one, we're just looking at the APC saved and the number of publications for each publisher with which we have an agreement. And then in the second graph, what we've done is mapped each individual article to its field of research within the Dimensions Analytics tool to get a sense of which subject areas we're getting discounts in most frequently. And so we haven't quite cracked linking each individual article to individual departments here at McMaster. We're currently working on that phase. But what we can do is use the field of research, the article level field of research, to kind of by proxy estimate which faculty, which departments are benefiting most from these agreements. And so unsurprisingly, here at McMaster, a very medically health science focused institution, we see the vast majority of these discounts are coming in biomedical and clinical science articles and health sciences articles. So again, the idea here is now that we have this sort of standardized data, we can use this to yearly go back in and reevaluate how these deals are performing for us. So just like the Open Alex approach, though, we didn't want to just trust this hybrid approach blindly. We wanted to We wanted to take a look under the hood and see exactly how it was working. And what we found was data limitations yet again. So we talked about the 300 articles that OpenAlex missed from the publishers list, but we also, when we ran it this time, noticed that there was 167 additional publications that OpenAlex pulled that weren't on the publishers list. And again, these seem to run the gamut as far as reasons for why things were missed. So first thing we noticed was that publication dates were disproportionately skewed to the beginning of the year. So that could lend credence to this reasoning behind that the reasoning these ones were missed was the misalignment between the APC year paid and the publication year. Perhaps the APC and all the discounts had happened the previous year, but the final publication year was still listed as 2024. There were some instances where we noticed that OpenAlex data was wrong. So we talked about missing corresponding author information, but there were also instances of over application of corresponding author information. So you go to the publisher's website, there's one corresponding author, but then by the time that metadata gets into OpenAlex, it looks like every author on the paper is a corresponding author. So we were getting some additional results pulled where McMaster wasn't in fact corresponding. Similarly, there were some instances of incorrect publication type metadata where the article on the website looked like, or the journal's website looked like an editorial or book review, but it got labeled as an article in OpenAlex, which obviously led to overpulling. There was others that appeared discount eligible, but the authors used non-McMaster email addresses. So we know that they might have used their hospital address or a personal address. And we know that some publishers are using domains to distinguish what affiliation you should have. I think another instance of confusion here is around people that have multiple affiliations. If somebody's both at U of T and McMaster, which institution qualifies for the discount? And then there was a whole list of others that appeared discount eligible, and we couldn't figure out any obvious reason why they would be excluded from the publishers list. We haven't had time to go through all 167 yet. We're currently in that process. And I think once we have that list of those that we are still kind of scratching our heads about, that's where we'll go back to the publishers and just try to get a sense of what exactly happened here, what got lost in translation, why were these ones not receiving discounts. So all this is to say, right, even in this sort of hybrid approach, there are still a lot of issues that need to be addressed and recognized. I think we've kind of become resigned to the fact that we're not going to get an exact dollar amount here. Instead, what we're getting is our best estimate. And so I think we've developed an approach with this hybrid approach that gets us in the ballpark. And I think we can use that data internally. We can use it for strategic planning. We can use it for even maybe a bit of collections budgeting. But what we can't always use it for, because it's not so specific and refined, is to understand the value, the exact dollar value of individual agreements with publishers. And so when we think about future considerations, I think the big key takeaway for us here is that standardization is key. If we want to be able to evaluate these individual agreements for their value, we need to demand increased transparency and standardization from the publishers as part of these agreements. That in order for us to be part of these agreements, the publisher needs to agree to delivering data in the way that makes sense for us as libraries to be able to assess that data. Another thing that's popped up is that there are a lot of people working on this. There's consortia, there are companies, there are tools being developed, standards organizations that are working on this alongside individual libraries and librarians that are trying to figure this issue out. Is there a way that we can be better collaborating on this to come up with shared solutions? It's just a question that sort of stands out in our mind. And then finally, something that's emerged as we've been working on this too is what we've termed APCs in the wild. These are the ones, APCs that are being paid for publication in journals for which we don't have read and publish agreements, right? And for which we're getting no data from the publishers about. What's the best way of tracking this stuff? Is OpenAlex and the approach that we described up front the kind of the starting point? And if so, this only underlines the importance of getting that corresponding author information in OpenAlex to a point where we can be more confident with the estimates we're able to derive from it. I'm now going to hand it over to Janice, who's going to talk a little bit more deeply about some of the other work being done in this area and how it aligns with the stuff that we're doing. Thank you.
As Jack mentioned, even though there are issues with equating cost avoidance with value, we're far from the only ones to want to provide this metric. It helps demonstrate the value of the agreements to the larger institution and also highlights the overall costs of publications. I'd like to quickly draw your attention to a few initiatives and services that are working in this space. In October, NISO released their draft recommendations for open access business processes. This isn't a standard, but recommends best practices for stakeholders, from funders and authors to publishers and libraries. It provides the fundamentals needed for data exchange, a data dictionary, and specifications of data elements. The draft is available online, as are the comments, and gives a good sense of the complications around seemingly simple things such as corresponding author and institutional affiliation. And we can hope that the recommendations are adopted and perhaps feed into a formal standard, because this is absolutely key. And this builds on earlier work from ESAC. There are also others working on this, and we've listed a few services which have pieces of the data or which are working on creating dashboards and summaries. And there are undoubtedly others out there. So the Copyright Clearance Center RightsLink is a transaction system that facilitates the payment of APCs and has payment information for select agreements, and it's free to libraries. The OA switchboard, which bills itself as the metadata exchange hub, automates the exchange of data on publications, but so far covers relatively few publishers. Wiley just came on board. However, you don't need to have an agreement in place to see publications coming from your institution, and their work is absolutely fundamental. The switchboard is available by subscription. Consortia Manager is the newest entry and just enhanced their suite with Transformative Agreement Manager, which uses data from OpenAlex and the OA switchboard, and this is also a subscription product. And if you're working with EBSCO, they are also developing dashboards. We know many consortia and individual libraries that, like us, are exploring the best ways to consolidate data, identify data gaps, and present summaries. And we hope our approach has given a few suggestions for ways forward. I'll now open the floor to questions. Our contact information is on the screen if you'd like to reach out to us later. And thank you for listening to our presentation.